Be me, Bennett. I work at a local hardware store. It is a soul-crushing gig. I am on my feet for 9 hours a day, mixing paint for people who cannot decide what they want. Couples constantly fighting in the aisles. They stand there staring at paint swatches, arguing over eggshell versus alabaster, like it is going to save their marriage. It never does. My old beater finally gave up the ghost, died right on the side of the highway, smoke everywhere, leaving me completely desperate for wheels. I do not have the credit for a dealership. My bank account is basically a tragedy. So I turn to the modern Wild West. Craigslist. Scrolling through the worst listings on earth, filtering out the obvious scams, ignoring cars that looked like they survived a demolition derby. Finally found a listing for a 2010 Toyota Corolla. The price was suspiciously reasonable, $2,000. The description was completely bare bones. Runs good, AC blows cold, need her gone, don't lowball me. I know what I have. I messaged the seller. We agreed to meet up. Parking lot of an abandoned Blockbuster. That was my first mistake, honestly. The whole place looked cursed, weeds growing through the cracked pavement, faded yellow lines. I got there early and just stood around, kicking loose gravel, wondering if I was going to get robbed. Finally, the car pulled up. The seller was a girl named Sabine. She looked to be about 23, completely average height, wearing an oversized vintage windbreaker, wire-rimmed glasses slipping down her nose. Her hair was shoved up into a messy claw clip. She was aggressively chewing a piece of blue gum. She did not look like a scammer. She looked like someone who gave up on a career in freelance graphic design and was currently liquidating her assets. She stepped out of the car, left the engine running. She has a name, by the way, Sabine said. She patted the hood of the Corolla. It's Eleanor. You have to talk nicely to her when you start the ignition, or the check engine light comes on. I stared at her for a second, waiting for the punchline. She was dead serious. She just popped the bubble with her gum. I popped the hood, checked the oil. It was dark, but fine. Kicked the tires. Took it for a spin around the block. It drove totally fine. It smelled vaguely of stale French fries and vanilla air freshener. There was a crushed receipt in the door pocket and a random chapstick rolling around the floorboard. But for $2,000 in cash, I was not going to complain. We parked back at the Blockbuster. I handed over a thick envelope of hundreds. She took it without counting. She signed the title over right there on the hood of the car. The wind kept trying to blow the paperwork away. I had to hold it down with my thumb. As I was getting in to leave, she leaned down to the open window. Take care of her. I'm only selling her because I maxed out my credit cards, buying vintage arcade cabinets to repair. It breaks my heart. Sure thing, I said, rolling the window up. I genuinely thought that would be the last time I ever saw her. I really did. Fast forward exactly 14 days. It was a Tuesday. I had just finished closing the hardware store. My feet were throbbing. My back ached. I smelled like fertilizer and regret. The parking lot was entirely empty, except for Eleanor sitting under a flickering yellow street lamp. All I wanted to do was drive home, fall onto my mattress, and stare at the ceiling until I fell asleep. I pressed the unlock button on my key fob. The headlights flashed. I walked up to the passenger side, pulled the handle, swung the door open, and dropped my heavy backpack onto the passenger seat. Except my backpack did not hit the seat. It hit a person. Ow, what the hell? A voice yelped. I practically jumped backward out of my own shoes, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scrambled for the overhead light switch, flicked it on. Sitting in the passenger seat, wearing the exact same oversized windbreaker from 2 weeks ago, was Sabine. She had a half-eaten Taco Bell chalupa in one hand and my backpack in the other. "What are you doing in my car?" I yelled, looking around the empty parking lot, like I was about to get pranked on television. Sabine blinked at me, completely unfazed. She took a slow bite of her chalupa, chewed, swallowed. "Technically, it's Eleanor, and I missed her. I bought this car from you." I practically shrieked, my voice cracking. "How did you even get in?" She reached into her windbreaker pocket, pulled out a worn metal key dangling from a faded lanyard. I kept the spare, you know, for emergencies. "This isn't an emergency. This is a felony." I rubbed my temples. I could feel a headache starting right behind my eyes. I could call the police right now. She rolled her eyes, shifted in the seat, pulled her knees up. "Oh, calm down, Bennett. I'm not stealing anything. I just wanted to sit in her for a bit. The acoustics in here are really good for listening to mid-2000s indie rock. I didn't think you'd be off work so late." I closed today, I muttered. Then I stopped myself. Why am I explaining my schedule to you? Get out of my car. I'm eating, she said, holding up the chalupa. It's rude to kick someone out while they're eating. We stared at each other in silence, the street lamp buzzing above us. I was too exhausted to fight and too confused to actually call the cops. Over a girl eating fast food in my passenger seat. Fine, I sighed, walking around to the driver's seat. I got in and slammed the door. Finish your food, then I'm driving you home. And you're giving me that spare key. Deal, she said, tearing open a hot sauce packet with her teeth. The drive was excruciating. She critiqued my braking the entire time. She reached over and adjusted the AC vents directly onto her face. She turned up the radio. You brake way too hard, she said. Eleanor has sensitive brake pads. You have to ease into it. I own the car, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel. Legally, yes, she said. Spiritually, we're co-parenting. I hit a pothole just to make her bounce. She dropped a piece of lettuce on the floor mat. When we finally pulled up to her house, it was a chaotic suburban place. Lawn ornaments everywhere. A plastic flamingo tipped over in the dirt. She handed over the key. You're no fun, she sighed. Bye, Eleanor. She patted the dashboard gently and walked away up her driveway. I drove home convinced that was the end of it. I locked the car 3 times, went inside and slept like a rock. It was not the end of it. A week later, I came out of my apartment, unlocked my car to go to work, and immediately smelled cheap espresso. I looked down. There was a half-empty iced latte in the cup holder, condensation dripping down the plastic. A yellow sticky note was taped to the steering wheel. Tire pressure on the front left is low. Also, I left a CD in the stereo. Track 4 is a banger. -C. I panicked and checked every lock. Everything was secure. I checked the back seat. Empty. I hit the eject button on the stereo. A burned CD popped out. Sharpie writing on it said Eleanor's road trip mix. I drove to work in total silence. I confronted her that night, drove straight to her weird house, knocked on the door. She answered holding a soldering iron. I had 3 spare keys, she said casually, leaning against the doorframe. I'm chaotic, not stupid. You are a psychopath, I told her, holding up the sticky note. I topped off your windshield wiper fluid, she shot back. And you were entirely out of it. You're welcome. Over the next month it escalated. Sometimes she would be waiting in the passenger seat when I got off work. Sometimes she would just leave notes. Or tiny objects. I found a stray hoodie in the back seat. Smelled like vanilla and soldering smoke. I found a Tupperware container on the floor with a single piece of cake in it. A post-it note said, Happy half-birthday to Eleanor. She never asked for rides anywhere. She just existed in the car, like a ghost that preferred the passenger side. Slowly, horrifyingly, I got used to it. My life was incredibly boring. Retail work, frozen dinners, sleep. Sabine was chaos with a pulse. She fixed those broken arcade machines. She lived on caffeine and pure spite. She would question traffic lights at 1 in the morning. Why is it red right now, Bennett? Who is coming? Nobody is coming. It's a conspiracy to keep us compliant. I would just sigh and wait for the green. Then the paperwork hit. I got a letter from the DMV. The title transfer got rejected. Apparently Sabine's signature was smudged, and she signed on the wrong line. I called her from the break room at work. I need you to come to the DMV with me, I said, rubbing my forehead. The DMV is a liminal space, she whispered over the phone. I don't go to liminal spaces. You have to, I said, or I can't register the car, and I will get pulled over. She groaned loudly. Fine, pick me up tomorrow morning. I picked her up at 8. She got in holding a massive iced coffee, wearing sunglasses inside the car. We drove to the DMV. The line was already out the door. We pulled a ticket. Number B84. They were currently serving at 12. We sat in those hard plastic chairs. She started eating a giant bag of gummy worms. She offered me one. I took a red one. So what exactly do you do all day? I asked her. Besides breaking into my car. I told you. I fix arcade cabinets. I buy them broken. I rewire the boards. I replace the buttons. I sell them to weird tech guys for a markup. Does that actually pay the bills? She laughed. Bennett, I live in a house with 7 lawn ornaments. Do you think I have bills? I don't even know what that means, I said. We waited for 3 hours. She complained about the fluorescent lighting, said it was messing with her aura. I told her to stop talking like that. Finally, they called B84. We walked up to the counter. The clerk was a woman who looked like she hated the concept of joy. I handed over the paperwork. The clerk stared at Sabine. "You signed in the cellar block," the clerk said, "but you used a green pen, blue or black ink only." Sabine leaned over the counter. "Green is the color of commerce," she said, completely deadpan. The clerk did not blink. "Fill out Form 72 again, blue or black ink. Next." We had to go sit back down. Sabine found a black pen in her bag. It was covered in dog hair. She filled out the form, resting it on her knee. We waited another hour. Finally got it stamped. We walked out into the blinding sunlight. I was starving. "I'm buying you food," I said, "for your trouble." She grinned. "Diner," she demanded. We went to a sticky 24-hour diner down the street. She ordered a plate of fries and covered them in black pepper. She spilled ketchup on the table and tried to wipe it up with a single napkin, just making a huge red smear. She was a total disaster. But sitting there across from her, watching her aggressively eat fries, I realized I wasn't thinking about the hardware store. I wasn't dreading my next shift. I was just watching this weird girl exist. Then the weekend happened. My older sister Elspeth called me. Elspeth is exhausting. She is the kind of person who reads one self-help book a week and uses it to make everyone around her miserable. "Bennett, I need you to come over," she said on the phone. "I bought a vintage dresser on Marketplace, and I need you to pick it up in your car." "Elspeth, a dresser won't fit in a Corolla," I said. "Bennett, I am really trying to protect my peace right now." She sighed heavily. "And your negativity is a huge roadblock for me. Just bring the car." I drove over to her apartment. She was waiting outside, wearing expensive yoga pants. She got into the passenger seat. Immediately, she sat on something. "What is this?" She pulled a messy hair clip from under her leg. I froze. "Oh, that's just a clip," I said. "Who is in your car, Bennett?" "Nobody." She looked around. She found a receipt in the door pocket. She found a bright pink chapstick. She looked at me like I was hiding a fugitive. "Are you harboring a toxic attachment?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Elspeth, please stop talking like that. I am just setting a boundary with your secrecy," she said, crossing her arms. "It's just a friend," I muttered, putting the car in drive. We drove to the Marketplace house. The dresser was massive, solid oak. "We are never getting this in the car," I said. "Bennett, you need to manifest a solution," she said, standing on the sidewalk drinking a kombucha. "I'm guarding my physical peace today, so I can't lift anything heavy." "You expect me to lift this alone?" I asked. She just took a sip of her drink. I struggled with the dresser for 20 minutes, trying to shove it into the trunk. I ended up scratching the bumper. I dropped one of the drawers on my foot. I cursed loudly. "Bennett, your energy is extremely hostile right now," Elspeth said. Stepping back, I slammed the trunk down, tied it shut with a piece of rope I found in the spare tire well, drove her back to her place in furious silence. When I finally got home, I was exhausted. I opened my phone and saw 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I listened to the voicemail. It was a towing company. They had my car. My heart dropped into my stomach. I called them back. "Yeah, we towed a silver Corolla from Elm Street," the guy on the phone said. "Elm Street. That was Sabine's neighborhood." "I didn't leave it on Elm Street," I told him. "Well, it was parked in a street sweeping zone," he said, "and someone was asleep in the front seat. They got out before we hooked it up, but the car was illegally parked." I hung up the phone. I was seeing red. I called Sabine. She answered on the first ring. "Hey, Bennett." She sounded completely innocent. "Why is my car in an impound lot?" I yelled. There was a long pause. "So," she started slowly. I was sitting in Eleanor, just chilling, listening to a podcast about unsolved mysteries, and I fell asleep. And I woke up to a guy knocking on the window, saying I was in a sweeping zone. So I got out, and he towed it. "Why didn't you move it?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I don't have the key that turns the ignition," she said defensively. "I only have the door key. You wouldn't let me keep an ignition key, so this is my fault," I asked. "I'm just saying," she mumbled. "If we were co-parenting equally, this wouldn't have happened." I had to take an Uber to the impound lot. It cost me $20. Sabine was waiting outside the chain-link fence, sitting on the curb, looking completely miserable. She had a heavy jar full of coins in her lap. I walked up to her. "I'm so mad at you right now," I said. "I know," she said quietly, looking at the dirt. She stood up and handed me the jar. "What is this?" "It's the impound fee," she said. I emptied my rainy day jar. There's $250 in there, mostly quarters, some crushed dollar bills. I stared at the heavy glass jar. She actually looked guilty. She wasn't wearing her windbreaker. She just looked small in a baggy t-shirt. Let's just go get the car. I sighed. We walked into the office. The guy behind the plexiglass looked angry at the world. I slid the paperwork under the slot. He typed on his keyboard. 250. He grunted. I slid the heavy jar of quarters under the slot. He stared at it. He stared at me. I'm not counting that, he said. You have to. Sabine piped up from behind me. It's legal tender. The guy glared at her. It took him 20 minutes to count the quarters. He hated us so much. He finally shoved the receipt under the glass. Go out back. Row G. We walked through the lot. Found Eleanor parked between a wrecked van and a rusty truck. I unlocked it. We got in. I gripped the steering wheel, just breathing heavily. I'm really sorry, Bennett, she said from the passenger seat. Her voice was actually soft. No sarcasm, no jokes. I looked over at her. She was pulling on the sleeve of her shirt. Just don't fall asleep in my car again, I said. Unless it's parked in my driveway. She looked up, a tiny smile forming. Deal. The next week things got worse at work. I was mixing a terrible shade of mustard yellow for a contractor. My manager Irving walked up behind me. Irving wears short-sleeve button-downs and hates his life. Hey Bennett, Irving said. We need to talk about the loitering in the parking lot. What loitering? I asked. Handing the paint can to the customer. There's a girl, Irving said, sitting in your car. She's been out there for 4 hours. She's got a sunshade up, but she's just sitting there, eating crackers. My face burned. Oh, I said. That's just my girlfriend. She's waiting for me to get off shift. The word girlfriend felt alien in my mouth. Irving frowned. Well, tell her she can't camp out here. It makes the store look bad. We're a hardware store, Irving, I said. We sell fertilizer and rat traps. We already look bad. Irving did not find that funny. Just handle it, he said, walking away. I went out to the parking lot on my lunch break, tapped on the glass. Sabine rolled down the window. She had cracker crumbs on her chin. You can't just hang out here all day, I told her. My manager is getting weird about it. She sighed, brushing crumbs off her shirt. I was bored. My soldering iron broke. I didn't have anywhere else to go. Why don't you sit in your own house? It's too quiet, she admitted, looking away. Eleanor smells like you. It's safe. I just stood there in the parking lot, the hot sun beating down on my neck. I realized I was completely in over my head. I didn't even know how to respond to that. So I just handed her my half-eaten sandwich. Go sit at the coffee shop down the street, I said. I'll pick you up when I clock out. She took the sandwich. Okay, she said quietly. A few days later, my coworker, Luther, tried to get smart. We were clocking out. Luther is the kind of guy who wears too much cologne and talks loudly about his gym routine. Hey, Bennett, Luther said, smirking. Who's the weird chick always sitting in your car? She single? I felt my jaw clench immediately. A hot spike of defensiveness hit my chest. Don't talk about her like that, I snapped. Luther put his hands up. Whoa, buddy. Just asking. She looks like she hasn't slept in a week. She's fine, I said, grabbing my bag. Leave her alone. I walked out to the car. She was sitting there playing a game on her phone. I got in and slammed the door. Everything okay? She asked, not looking up from the screen. Yeah, I said, putting the car in gear. Just coworkers being stupid. I drove her home in silence. I was hyper-aware of her sitting next to me. The way she tucked her knees up, the way she hummed along to the radio. Then the big crisis happened. It was a Friday night, pouring rain. Elspeth called me, screaming into the phone. Bennett, my cat, got out. She was crying. I can't find Mr. Sprinkles, and I'm having a full panic attack. My nervous system is completely dysregulated. I need you to come help me look. I groaned. Elspeth, it's raining sideways. I need support, Bennett, she wailed. Do not abandon me. I hung up, grabbed my keys. I drove out into the storm. The windshield wipers were fighting for their lives. I hit a massive puddle on the highway. Suddenly, there was a loud pop, then a hissing sound. Thick white smoke started billowing from under the hood. The temperature gauge spiked all the way to the red. I wrestled the car over to the shoulder. Parked near a closed strip mall. The engine died completely. I sat there listening to the rain hammer the roof. I popped the hood and got out. Got instantly soaked. Looked underneath. Coolant was pouring onto the wet pavement, mixing with the rain in bright green puddles. The radiator was completely cracked. I walked back to the driver's seat, slumped down, water dripping from my hair. I pulled out my phone. I called Sabine. She answered immediately. Hey, Bennett. Eleanor died, I said, my voice sounding hollow. Radiator cracked. I'm stuck on the side of Route 9. There was a pause. Send me your location, she said. She hung up. 30 minutes later, a massive flatbed tow truck pulled up, the yellow flashing lights cutting through the rain. The passenger door of the tow truck opened. Sabine jumped out, wearing her oversized windbreaker. She ran over to my window. I rolled it down. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She wiped rain off her glasses. "I called a guy," she yelled over the storm. "He owed me a favor for fixing his arcade machine. We're taking her to my house." The tow driver hooked up the Corolla, winched it up onto the bed. I climbed into the cab of the truck with them. I was freezing, shivering in my soaked shirt. Sabine reached into her bag, pulled out a dry gray hoodie, handed it to me. "Put that on before you freeze to death," she muttered. I pulled it over my head. It was warm. We rode in silence to her house. The tow driver dropped the car in her driveway. It was still raining. I stood on her porch looking at the car. "I can't afford this," I admitted, rubbing my face. "I have $50 in my checking account. A mechanic is going to charge $800. Sabine shook her head. "We don't need a mechanic," she said, opening her front door. "We have YouTube, and I have a socket set." We spent the entire next day in her driveway. The rain had stopped. The sun was baking the concrete. We watched 4 different tutorial videos. We drained the rest of the coolant into a plastic pan. We unbolted the fans. She was covered in grease. She had a smudge of black oil across her cheek. She swore constantly, fighting with rusted bolts. I handed her tools. We took a break and sat on the driveway eating cold pizza. "Why are you helping me this much?" I asked her. She chewed a piece of crust, looking at the car. "Because you're broke," she said simply. "And because it's Eleanor. And maybe because I like hanging out with you." She didn't look at me when she said it. She just picked at a grease stain on her jeans. I felt a weird lump in my throat. I didn't know what to say, so I just bumped my shoulder against hers. She bumped back. We finally got the new radiator in. We bought it cheap from a scrapyard that morning, bolted everything down, filled it with fresh green coolant. We stood by the open hood. "Moment of truth," I said. She tossed me the keys. I got in, turned the ignition. I spoke nicely to the dashboard. "Please, Eleanor," I whispered. The engine turned over, coughed once, and roared to life, a steady purr. No warning lights, no smoke. I laid on the horn. Sabine cheered from the driveway. She jumped up and down, throwing a greasy rag in the air. I turned the car off and got out. My hands were black with grime. My back was killing me, but I was smiling so hard my face hurt. "I owe you," I said, looking at her. "You sure do," she replied, wiping her hands on her jeans. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the spare key on the faded lanyard. She tossed it in the air. "Caught it. I keep the key," she said, looking right at me. "Permanent aux privileges. And you have to let me pick the diner tonight." I stared at my car. Then I looked at her, standing there in my driveway, a chaotic mess of a person who somehow fixed the biggest problem in my life. "Fine," I sighed, trying to sound annoyed but failing completely. "But if you play that terrible Hyperpop CD again, I am driving us straight into a ditch." She smirked, walked around to the passenger side, opened the door, and got in. I walked around to the driver's side, slid into the seat. She was already tearing open a hot sauce packet. I put the car in gear. I looked at the sticky notes on the dashboard, the random chapstick in the cup holder, the gray hoodie crumpled in the back seat. It wasn't just my car anymore. I backed out of the driveway. The radio kicked on. Track 4 started playing. We drove down the street. The check engine light stayed off. Passenger door clicked, locked.